Hello everyone, and welcome to another Star Trek Online video. And today it's about the Proxima, a newly released ship that is part of the new bundle. And you can also buy it by itself or use a token to acquire it, if you still have an unrestricted ship coupon. Now we're going to start this off here in the Taylor, as it is certainly an interesting looking ship. And honestly, some of the skins are growing on me. I'm not the biggest fan of the base Proxima skin here, but then there is a Proxima 2, which looks, in my opinion, a lot better. This is a skin that I kind of like. And then there is the Pollux, a more modern one. So you've got like the sort of original series skin, you have a motion picture skin, and then you have like the modern skin here. And of course, all of those skins feature all the different materials, so you can make that look a lot different if you want to. And you can mix and match, and as usual, you can apply patterns to it. So if you wanted to, right, you could, for example, say maybe I like something like this, or maybe I like the modern skin. But what about the pod up there, right? So we can change the torpedo pod, and then we can be like, you know what, I want a torpedo pod up there. But the torpedo pod seems a bit lonely, so why don't we raise the pylons a bit? That was... yeah. And now you have looking ship, and yeah, then you could say maybe the nacelles. I really like the... actually, there are a lot of different nacelles now that I look at it. You could even... so if you wanted to, you could have single nacelles up there. That's curious. Or... wait, they are... oh, no. They are fine now. I thought they were missing their head there for a moment. Well, yeah, you could be like, I know I like the original series kind of nacelles there. Or, I mean, personally, I think the MP ones look pretty good. Maybe something like this, right? And as you can see, you can do a lot of interesting stuff with this. Now you can obviously change patterns if you wanted to. And the colors here. And then, of course, you can mix this with a material. I like the Type 7 and the Type 7. Actually, Type 7 looks maybe even better than Type 7A. Huh. You know what? Type 7 looks pretty good. Go a little bit bluish with Intemperate. You know, I think instead of mixing and matching, I'm gonna go with the Proxima 2. But I'm gonna like change, I think, the color here a bit. And then hull material, I didn't think I want that. How about we go with actually the Type 7? I think that looks nice. And then maybe windows. So we could then add something like... I don't know, let's add the galaxy windows to this. I've spent a lot of time at the Taylor already, but I guess I do have at least 2 vanity shields here that tend to be rather popular somewhat, so like the Baul one. And you know what? That doesn't look too bad. Or Emperor one. You think it's a little bit of yellow there? Okay, but it's a gorgeous looking ship without the vanity shield, and we're gonna stick with that for now. Now, you might be here to learn more about the ship itself and not just gaze upon him. So let's start with the console it comes with. That is the side pulse phases. Now, the side pulse phases are a console that it does give you 5 maximum auxiliary power, but honestly, I don't think it's a console that works very well with this ship. The ship has a 4-3 weapons layout and can mount dual cannons, so I prefer like a forward-facing setup. Also, a lot of science abilities are more like forward-facing, so it just doesn't synergize too well with this layout. Now, obviously, just because your weapon's forward-facing doesn't mean there aren't enemies towards the side of you, so there can get some use out of that. But the console itself isn't the strongest either. So there is a broadside console, I think it's called Full Broadside or something like that. It's from the Anniversary Bundle, and that one is a lot stronger. So the Anniversary console does at least twice the amount of damage that this one does, like DPS-wise, right? So the side pulse phases are a little bit on the weaker side, let's put it like this. They aren't useless, mind you. They still do damage. And the downside is they have 5-kilometer range. So it needs quite a bit of positioning to get the most out of it. And, well, they do have a 30-second recharge, which is kind of an upside. But I assume because the recharge is so low, they have reduced the damage it does. And with a lot of cooldown reduction, the low base cooldown isn't that big of an advantage, it feels like. Like, if you're using the full broadside console from the Anniversary Bundle, and you're using unconventional systems, and you're using the teleport console from last year's summer ship, right? You can get the cooldown so low that the lower base cooldown is not as big as an advantage as it would be. And therefore, this console is essentially just not performing. It's not useless, mind you. It's okay-ish, right? And if you don't have a lot of cooldown reduction, you might get more out of it. So if you are not into unconventional systems, if you don't use anything to reduce cooldown on consoles, then you might get some fun out of this one. So there is that. Now, also, side note, you can obviously use this with the other full broadside console, right? So if you're going for a full broadside build, and I've tested this, mind you, on a full broadside phaser build, and you can combine both consoles, right? There's nothing stopping you. Just because this performs worse doesn't mean it doesn't add anything. So, yeah, and you can have some fun with this. Now, let's talk about the Starship trait. So, the Starship trait here is an interesting one. It gives you Starship shield penetration, Starship weapon specialization, and Starship weapon amplification. So it increases your weapon crit chance and crit severity based on your maximum auxiliary power. Not your current auxiliary power, your maximum auxiliary power. Now, I do have the Fleet Network array in here, which gives you 5 more maximum auxiliary power. And if you had this, like the base console here, like the side pulse phases equipped, that would also be 5 more maximum auxiliary power. So that brings the maximum to 130, and with 130 you gain, I think, 52% crit severity and 5.2% crit chance. Now, as an engineer, right, I could buff this. If I press EPS power transfer, you will see those numbers go up, and it's now 155 shield pen and weapon specialization. And this is, I think this would be about 60% crit severity and 6% crit chance or so. Now the problem is this trait lasts 20 seconds and can only be triggered every 60 seconds. So it has 1/3 uptime. And that means the Starship trait is not that far off. Where is it? Like, there is from the temporal reputation, you can like improved critical systems that gives you 3% crit chance and 15% severity. And with 2 emergency power abilities, you can have this permanently up. It's obviously weaker than the new trait here, the use of power. But only a 1/3 uptime means you have to be a little bit... Like, I mean, I say you have to be a little bit careful. The thing is, it triggers with every science or miracle worker bridge officer abilities. And you, as a science ship, you're going to use a lot of science powers, right? So you can't really time this well. You just have to hope that it goes off on most useful times. Because you are not going to hold your science abilities back just to trigger this at a better moment. It also triggers if, like, I have hazard emitters here. If you use hazard like after combat, it will also trigger. So keep that in mind. But it's not a bad trade. And there is now something else that I have to point out with this. There is a very nice synergy with a popular science. See, there is the revolutionary set. This is in the sense it's from an old event, and it's I think in the mods market currently. And this set is very popular because it gives you exotic crit severity. And this case with Starship weapon amplification. So as you can see, it now gives me 53.7 crit severity with exotic abilities. What happens if I trigger this trait, right? So if I use hazard emitters, I now trigger this trait, and then we look at this, and suddenly I'm getting 109.3% exotic damage critic. So as you can see, while this trait mostly buffs up weapon crit chance and severity, if you are using the 2-piece of the revolutionary set, this will also significantly increase crit severity for your science. And that makes this probably a little bit more interesting. That's also something I guess I should point out with like other crit traits, right? If you're using something like critical systems, this just gives you crit chance like generally and severity, or there is ship of the line trait, for example, that gives you a crit severity. A lot of crit traits, right, give you general crit, while this one gives you only crit for weapons. But as I've pointed out, if you're using the revolutionary set, you're also getting crit severity for science, so that's nice. So honestly, this isn't the best trait in the world, but this is a decent trait, right? And depending on what other traits you have available, this is certainly something that you could use on a science ship or so. So there we go. Now, let's talk about my build. We've discussed the accessories, let's discuss the ship itself. This ship is a Miracle Worker Science Dreadnought, and there is a lot of whining about the Miracle Worker part because Miracle Worker isn't really the best specialization for science. That doesn't make this ship bad, right? Anyone who tells you this is a bad ship, they are wrong. It's not a perfect ship, it's not the best ship, but it's a decent ship. You still have a 4-3 weapons layout, and you get one more console slot from the Miracle Worker, and one console slot is worth a lot, especially on a science ship, well, assuming you have good consoles. So this ship will perform pretty nicely. And, you know, it's as I said, like, it's not a perfect ship, but not every ship can be. This ship performs more than adequate enough, right? So, okay. Having said that, I've set it up with disruptors, and, well, I'm using quad cannons because they look cool. Then I have a wide arc cannon, I have the Dark Matter Quantum Torp, and the Terran Task Force heavy cannons here. So I've set this up with Disruptor because I'm using the Dragon's Blood Flame Reactor, which also buffs Disruptor, and, you know, some... I mean, it's a very strong flamethrower, and it also buffs other exotic damage types. So Disruptor just seemed like a good fit for this. You can set this up any way you want, mind you. This is just an example build on how you could build this. So, as I've mentioned earlier, I have the 2-piece revolutionary set for the science stuff. I'm using the deflector there, and I'm using the warp core. Then I have the shield and engine from the Discovery reputation, because the health regeneration is just hard to pass on, it's just too good. I have a deteriorating secondary deflector. because that provides quite a nice damage boost. And then in the back I have the Pavan Omni, which is just a very good Omni. I have the Kinetic Cutting Beam, and I have another Omni Beam here, which actually should be a turret if I think about it. That should be a high molecular turret, so never mind. I was considering using mixed armament synergies, and with mixed armament synergies, a beam here would make sense. But I've decided not to go that route. So let's put the turret here. You have the Kinetic Cutting Beam because I just like it. The Pavan Omni is just pretty good. And console-wise, I have the Cranium Chronophage. This is a very strong console, obviously even stronger on a science build, and I highly recommend it. It's very cheap in the exchange. You can slap this on any build if you want to, if you're into universal consoles. I have the Dragonspot Flame Reactor. It's from old event ship, I guess. There is the Proton Eruptor. That is from the Dyson Science Destroyer, the Klingon Dyson Science Destroyer. Also pretty good exotic console. I have a Delphic Tear Generator, mostly because of the bonus exotic damage, because bonus exotic damage is nice. The Delphic Tear itself isn't that strong. Also a cheap console you can get from the exchange. The Particle Conversion Matrix, it helps with damage and survival, I suppose. It's from the Guardian Cruiser from the Sandstorm. Then I have the Custom Power Matrix, that is from the last winter event ship, and I've slotted it in the engineering place for the auxiliary power. Now obviously as soon as I activate the toggles here, it will drain some auxiliary power. But I'm an engineer here, so like power levels are very easy to manage for me. I have the Fleet Power Network Array, just a very strong console, and Particle Gen and Max Aux Power are also very good. And I mean, the haste is obviously, this is just one of the strongest consoles that I slap on every ship basically. I have the Assimilated Module, which forms a 2-set with the Cutting Beam. Then I have the Exotic Field Exciter for more Particle Gen, and I have one with more auxiliary power to help. Because, you know, you want like your weapon power and your auxiliary power as high as possible, essentially. Probably not needed. You could have like another mod there. You could also mount a different science constant. As I said, like this is just essentially like don't treat this build as gospel or as perfect or as anything. This is just a build that I've slapped together that works well, and you can do numerous changes here depending on your playstyle or what you prefer, right? Here I have the Expanding Sphere Generator. This is from one of the other from the other ships in the bundle. It's honestly not that great. I'm trying to get a feel for it, and since I was setting up this science ship already with quite a bit of particle gen and so on, I've decided to give this a go. It's not performing that well, let's put it like this. Needs maybe a little bit more testing, maybe a little bit better positioning. Yeah, we could easily, like this is just here for me to play around with, right? This console could easily be replaced with something better, mind you. I have a Gemini device, which is from another Sandstorm ship. It gives you firing cycle haste, it gives you passive exotic damage, and it summons 2 enterprises who perform pretty decently, and I kinda like pets, you know. Well, we already summoned pets here, why not a few more? I have the DPRM, that's a relatively expensive console that I've got from a Mats bundle, and like it can be replaced with, for example, a cheaper option would be from the flagship set, right? The flagship set has a defensive console that would work well here as well, or anything else. I mean, if you need more defense, you could go for the The legendary Valdor has a console where you get shield, where you have a chance with your energy weapons to get shield. I mean, as I said, there are options. This is the teleport console from last year's summer event, and this is Lorcas, and then I have the Valor Fighters here. Now, the Type 7 shuttles with the beta debuff would also be a very good choice here, obviously. Or any other pet that you want. Now, let's quickly go over some traits. So, I think notable is the Particle Manipulator, which is a trait that you want on every science ship. This trait is from crafting, so essentially if you have 15 in science in your R&D, then you get this trait, and it gives you critical chance and severity based on your exotic particle generator. I mean, 50% crit chance with exotics is just hard to pass up, and some more crit severity. I'm using unconventional systems for the faster bridge office, for the fast console recharge. I'm using Boimler for bridge officer recharge. I have Fragment of AI tech, which is a nice one for some more energy weapon damage, especially if you already have quite a bit of control expertise. I've got Harmonic Shield Linkage is a trait that's not that expensive, and that is a very nice defensive trait for shield regeneration. So that's nice. And you have a bunch of others here. They are not like the most... Like the really important thing here would be Particle Manipulator and unconventional systems. So those are like the important parts here, to be honest. And Boimler, I guess. Then Starship trait-wise, now I'm using the new trait here. I am using Superior Denial for my pets. I'm using Withering Barrage for my Cannon Scatter Volley. I'm using Emergency Weapon Cycle. I have the Ruin of Our Enemies, also a very expensive trait that I also have that from Mud's Battles. I have a few expensive things, I suppose. There is Repurposed Cargo Bay, which gives me more pets. And then I have 5 magics from an old event ship. Now there is a number of other traits that you could use. You could use more traits that buff like critical chance, for example, and crit severity. You could have something like an improved gravity well could be nice, right? Because obviously I'm using gravity well. You could do if you wanted to set this up a little bit differently, there would be spore-infused anomalies and so on. Like, this is what I'm using right here, but as I've said, like, there are plenty of options to build your ship, right, and make it your own in a sense. So space traits, I have once again like more crit chance and severity. Then I'm using the offensive auxiliary configuration because obviously I have a lot of aux power. And then I'm using magnified firepower for my weapon damage. So let's come to the stations. Now station-wise, I'm using Scatter Volley, Beta, and Torpedo Spread in my tactical slot. Then I have emergency powered weapons and engines in my engineering slot. You could change engines to auxiliary, and auxiliary would also make quite a bit of sense, you could argue. But engine power also helps, like the Breath of the Dragon, and technically I have the quad cannons, which also like drain engine power and so on. And I manage my auxiliary just fine, it feels like. But emergency auxiliary is definitely an option here. Now, science-wise, I've got gravity well free because I wanna pull stuff together. I've got the Photonic Shockwave, which is an unconventional systems trigger. I've got Destabilizing Resonance Beam and Structural Analysis. Both of those trigger my my secondary deflector and do some nice damage that way. Then I have Narrow Sensor Bands, which gives me some bonus energy weapon damage. I have Scramble Sensors and Tractor Beam for more unconventional systems triggers, and I have a Hazard Emitter because, I mean, it doesn't heal a lot. It's mostly to remove dots and debuffs. Now, having like the structural analysis and the destabilizing resonance beam, I think are enough to trigger the secondary deflector. You could put in more if you wanted to. You could also replace something like now sensor pens here. There is another uncon trigger you could use in science. It's is it jam sensors or something like that? So if you wanted more of that. But this is how I've built it, and overall this works pretty well. And now let's see it in action. Let's jump into an Agala Elite. She is a good looking ship, isn't she? So first we're gonna turn on our togglers. Then we're gonna launch some pets here. Now let's start engaging the enemy. Yeah, science certainly has a lot of effect span.
Looks like our fight got them to notice us. Let's go over and ask if their boss might come out of hiding.
So, as you can see, stuff is melting relatively quickly here.
Whittle down their numbers. We will not go quietly.
And as you can also see, right, people are usually whining about unconventional systems triggers and so on.
And surrender to the Benton Guard.
Only with the science skills, I feel like I'm getting more than enough unconventional system out of this together with the teleport console. So I can't really complain about the availability of my universal consoles here. I also can't complain about the damage here, to be honest.
We do what we want, where we want.
Ah, glorious. I'm gonna point my nose at this one.
Picked up a tight feed transmission on a new frequency.
Oh.
We're jamming that spectrum.
Oh, there they be behind me. That's, I mean, obviously if my nose isn't pointing at them, it takes a little bit longer. Take them out. Hey. Oh.
Got this. Excellent work. We'll send over a pacification party, take the suspect into custody.
Yeah, so I can't see how anyone can call this ship bad. So, is it perfect? No. Does it have sort of the best loadout for a science ship? No. Will it top the damage charts? No. Is it absolutely strong enough to do any elite content with ease? Yes. Like, as I've said, right, if you just put some science uncon triggers there and you have the woven console, you can absolutely do your console spam build. You have plenty of science abilities to trigger your deflector. You have a hangar bay, you have a 4-3 weapons layout. The additional console slot is pretty nice, and you have a good looking ship, which is also important, right? So yeah, there it is, the Proxima. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you have some fun in this ship if you decide to pick it up. And I'll see you next time.